Hi, so in this video, I'm going to continue the series that I'm doing, basically an introduction to R for cognitive psychology. So this is meant for my lab and other similar labs, or just anyone that could benefit from an introduction to how to analyze data for cognitive psychology experiments. So this was the first in the series, so just very basic, loading a data set into R. So if you want to follow along, you might want to start there. And so what we did was we went to, this is my website where this publication, Byrne et al. From 2020 in Cognition. This data link goes to it goes to our Open Science Framework page. And then to get the files we're working with, they are in this RL and multi-level modeling folder. So if you want to follow along, you can download these files. Now, last time we went through just getting a data set into R. When I first started learning R, that was kind of one roadblock for me, was just how do you, actually get your data in to then do things with that data file. And so anyhow, if you're following along, you'll need to change this path for the folder. So this is the folder where those files from the Open Science Framework are. And so I'm going to set this as my working directory, and then I'm going to type get working directory and verify that that folder's there. We won't be using these packages yet, I don't think. I think we're still going to use base R for this example, but we'll be using them in future videos in this series. So today I'm going to do the next step, and so this is just like some basic manipulation of the data. So if we want to add, say, new variables, or we're going to like rename a variable. And this data set that we're using has data from both studies. So I'll show how you can easily break the data down into separate data sets. Now I think that actually does use a function called subset from tidyverse. Okay, and so here we're loading our data. So we're in this folder that I've created, our example videos. We're going to load our data, call it data1. Okay, and then we will do the head command. This gives the first 6 rows, tells us all of these column names. In the last video, I went over what each of these column names means. You can also type view, and this will open kind of like a spreadsheet in another window. And this will give you like the full view of the data. So you can see it's showing 1 of 20 of 20,600 entries. That's 206 total participants with 100 trials per participant. So the data is, in this case, is in what's called tidy form. It's concatenated, and then each column indicates what variable that column contains. And so we have now, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to create this new data frame called data old, and I'll just assign this as data 1. And I'm going to press Control Enter. So what that'll do is that's going to give us, we're going to manipulate some different variables in this data 1 data set. And so we have data old there to compare and see what the data looked like before. So we looked at the data. Now we have 100 trials in this study. Okay, and then we can compute the number of participants by using this nrow function. So that'll tell us the total rows in our data frame, data 1, divided by 100, the number of trials. Okay, and so now we have all of these variables over here. So you can see these values right here verify that they're entered correctly. And so now what we're doing here is we have this variable called condition. So you can see condition right now, it's 0 for if they're in the stress condition, 1 if they're in the control condition. But R doesn't have any problem handling basically strings or words as categorical variable names, and it actually can work better in some cases. In this case, we're going to make the variable categorical and have a string name, and that way those names will go directly into our plot, so we don't have to create a separate legend or modify that or anything. Okay, and so I'm going to press Control Enter to run that line. Okay, and then now you can look at the header for data 1. Okay, and you can see that now it looks like the condition is just a string name, whereas before it was just a number. Okay, and so we did that basic manipulation. I've since discovered that this line really is redundant, so it doesn't really hurt us. It doesn't mess up the rest of the script. But I think this was just a relic from a previous script that I built this one on top of. So anyhow, now we have something that we need to do. So in this study, we analyzed the data by blocks to sort of look at learning over time. So we divided the data into 4 blocks of 25 trials each. Now there is probably some easier way to do this. I think we could use like the rep function. But one way that works that you can do is to use these if-else functions, and then to do a conditional command based on the trial variable. So trial goes from 1 to 100. So if trial is less than 25, then we're creating this new variable called block. So this money sign, which you've seen here and above, that can be used on like any data frame to either modify an existing variable, or you can just like declare a new variable, which is what we're doing here. And so we're doing it based on an if-else, a series of if-else contingencies. So if the trial is less than 25, then block is equal to 1. Otherwise, we do this other if-else contingency. If the trial is between 26, so greater than 25, less than or equal to 50, then it's block 2. And then same thing for block 3. And then if trial is greater than 75, it's in block 4. Otherwise, if it's none of these, we have it return a 0. But that won't be the case here because we just have numbers from 1 to 100 for this trial variable. Okay, and so we run that. Okay, and so we can go back up. We could retype, this, but I just click it again. And so now you can see that we have this block variable as well. Now I don't remember if we actually use the centered value for block, but in some regression analyses, if you're looking at, say, multi-level models with block as a predictor, you might want to center the variables. And so here, this is an example of how you can center any variable. We create a new variable called block center, and then we take the block and then subtract the mean of that variable from it. And so if we type Control Enter to do that, okay, we can go back up here and check the header. Now block centered. It's starting at negative 1.5, then it goes to 0.5. Negative 0.5, 0.5, and then positive 1.5 for block 4. Okay, and so now we have those variables we've created. Now we're going to add an experimenter number variable. Now in this case, the way our data was set up when we put the original raw data all together in a concatenated form, subject numbers greater than 200 were for experiment 2, and then less than 200 were for experiment 1. So we just create this new variable data 1 using the money sign. We're going to label it experiment. And then we use this if-else statement again. So if the subject number is less than 200, this is what we assign that variable experiment as, experiment 1 or experiment 2. And so we're creating a string factor again, a string variable again, just because that's going to go into like our labels for our plots later. So just sort of adds, reduces one step down the line basically. Okay, and so we have that experiment variable now in our data1 data frame. And then we're going to declare it as a factor just to make sure that R is reading it as a factor and not like a numerical continuous variable. This can be something if you do an ANOVA or a regression and it like kind of gives you weird output. just make sure that your categorical variables are being treated as factors. So sometimes just doing this, we're just, basically renaming or, recalling the experiment variable by calling it and then denoting it as a factor. And so we have that now. Okay, and so then the last thing for this video that I want to show is how to subset data. Now this is a very, very useful function. I use it all the time just to get like different sets of your data or different subsets of your data that you want to look at separately. So like I mentioned, this data is all concatenated. We had subject numbers that were greater than 200 were experiment 2 and less were experiment 1. And so now we're going to create these new data frames. After we've done all these we've added all these variables we want, we're going to subdivide the data 1 data frame. We're going to by creating new data E1 data frame and then a new data E2 data frame. Okay, and so we're doing this by calling the subset command, tell the data frame that we want to use, and then we use this conditional statement, experiment equals experiment 1. And so experiment is the label of that variable in the data 1 data frame. So when we run this, okay, and now maybe I want to verify that this is about how many. We basically did the correct thing, and it's about how many rows there should be in the experiment 1 data set. So remember, there are 20,600 rows in the total data set, 11,100 here, so that's for like 111 participants in experiment 1. Okay, and then I do the same thing, making a new data frame for the data from experiment 2, and then check the number of rows in that, and it's 9,500, or for 95 participants in experiment 2. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for this video. I'm going to press Control S just to save this file for when I pick it up next time. And so this is, just some simple things. A lot of these are things that you might have to do. If you want to analyze the data by block, create that type of factor, subset the data, another very useful tool. And of course, you can just create as many data frames as you want, and they're all different, portions of the data that you might need to look at individually. Just given your goals for the analysis. Okay, so we will pick it up on the next video.